Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful night whatever it is for you. I'm going to be talking about two different Oculus Rift horror games tonight. Alone and Terrorift. These two are quite odd in how they are handled, however one is more unique than the other. With that being said, let's get right into it, shall we? Alone was released on August 9th, 2013, not to be confused with Alone in the Rift, a different Oculus Rift horror title. This game actually had quite the push behind it from the development team Greenwood Games. There was even a full Kickstarter for it and everything, which was not unusual for this time since quite a few other VR games and products had Kickstarters. However, this one had some weird issues which I'll describe later. The background for this game is that it's 12 AM and you are slowly going insane on your couch, like an average overworked college student. However, we remember that we recently bought a spooky adventure game to play, so we hook up all our consoles and boot up the game. Though as we go through the story and play through it, something isn't right. The disturbing presences from the game seem to leak into reality. It's not just a game anymore. I'm very sorry I had to make that reference. Okay, so let me be more direct. The idea of Alone is that it plays off of gameception. You are playing a game inside of the game, and sometimes this game breaks through to the virtual world. Shadows will pass by, thunder will roar, footsteps will be heard. The game itself inside the game isn't the most interesting thing to exist. I mean, it's a top-down game where you collect objects and notes along the way. However, the notes do add a bit more context to the scene and affect the creep factor. For instance, caught a glimpse of someone in the woods today, possibly the groundskeeper, and a shadow will pass by to your left in the kitchen. Another example is, sleeping has become a rough term for laying awake at night. The fear and suspicion of being watched is overwhelming. Kinda like how our characters are extremely paranoid and up late at night as well. Then right after this, we see an alternative view of a room with a shadow creeping up on us. However, these notes have a flaw. As I mentioned, this game was made during the Oculus Rift DK1 era, which had a resolution of 800p resulting in something called a screen door effect. This just means you can see the individual pixels on the screen like you're looking for a screen door, which creates a rather blurry image of the virtual world. So while the game looks like this on the screen, this is roughly what it looks like in the headset. What I'm trying to say here is that due to the low resolution of the headset, I found myself sometimes having to take off the Rift so I could read the text on the screen. Apparently the game developers didn't even have an Oculus Rift when they were making this game, so that's probably why this issue exists. However, that doesn't stop this from being one of the coolest VR horror concepts ever made, and I don't think we've really seen something like this. The closest games I can think of are Duck Season and Super Hot VR. But that's more playing a VR game in a VR game than what Alone was going for. Playing a traditional TV screen video game in virtual reality, as the environment around you is messed around with. I could actually see the style working perfectly with mixed reality. The idea of scanning your actual house and seeing the environment be messed around with would be so cool. Having the lizardman stalk you outside a window would be pretty eerie. In fact, one Oculus forum post recommended the idea of messing with the headset itself, lowering and raising the brightness Eternal Darkness style. If it sounds like I'm all in for this concept, I totally am. I am in love with it. If I was going to make a VR horror game, this is what I'd make. The Kickstarter planned to make a full release of the title a 30 to 45 minute experience. This was mainly due to how back then VR was very primitive and uncomfortable. However, this lacking length may have been one of the reasons the game didn't get funded. Expecting $25,000 to be funded to make a game 2 times longer than the average short indie game is pretty unrealistic. However, I believe most of that money was going to go towards the game inside of the game, The Witching Hour. The idea of this game was to be a first-person multiplayer shooter that had quote-unquote no real players playing with you. But apparently wasn't in the normal bot way, so I'm unsure of what that was supposed to mean. I don't know about this, to be honest. I'm not opposed to the idea of playing an FPS game inside of a VR game. However, so much of this Kickstarter is about The Witching Hour than it is Alone. They clearly have enough ideas to make the game its own thing. And it makes me wonder why they didn't just make it standalone from the get-go, instead of leaving it as a stretch goal. Some of the other stretch goals planned were some plans to release the game for PS4, make a fake movie poster, and a plushie too. All of this sounds cool, I just think they were a bit too ambitious. But hey, since printers exist, I can get my fake movie poster anytime I want. I think I printed it wrong. I feel like I sounded really ill in how I feel about the developers there, so I should contextualize that I did want to see this game released and the Kickstarter succeed. The concept has so much potential, and I really want to see a full game like this. I just don't think they had it planned out well enough. It feels like the main game was going to be an extended tech demo, and that they were going to put most of their work into a side game that wasn't most people's interest. It doesn't help that the Greenwood Games website shut down shortly after the Kickstarter failed to meet its goal, and no one knows how they are doing today. Well, let's talk about the next game on the list, Terrorift. This is a dungeon crawler styled horror game made by Zebazako. Oh my gosh. Zebas Capo. I really try to pronounce that right. One of the main inspirations for this project was another horror game named Dreadhalls, one of the most iconic VR horror experiences. This inspiration shows itself in the main environment in Terrorift, a giant maze full of creatures and other spooky environments. However, it's different in several ways. The big thing is that the maze you spawn in is not randomly generated, it's the exact same each time. You are also given no map or tools to guide you apart from a torch that does not run out of fuel. Also, despite there being a few enemies roaming around, only a few try to kill you. Most of them just kind of stand around and hang out, such as this little girl that screams at you. This is also the same stock as zombie girl model found in Dreadhalls and Affected. Because this is not randomly generated, the places you visit have a fair amount of detail to them, and it feels like a weird, winding, haunted house, rather than a maze. Even if I can guarantee you that all the assets in this are just store-bought and put together. While the game has no real story, you are given one main objective. Lucy disappeared in 1943. She loved to play the piano. Find the 7 piano scores and play it to know the truth. You have to find these piano sheets along the giant maze, and they aren't really hard to find. They are just tied to some scary events. Like a Howdy Piano, there is a figure that appears for a split second and then disappears. Now remember when I say that only a few entities try to hurt you? Well, there are 2 enemies that actually try to hurt you, guarding 1 page each. First of all is in this bluish room lurking in the corner. The entity is a zombie that chases after you, and you need to slip by him to the right to get by. Could it be these walls are echoing? Ah, death. No! Run! I don't know how much this thing's following me! No! Now, I would never get scared by something like this normally, but the reason why this caught me off guard was because there was another enemy in the maze that looks exactly the same and does absolutely nothing. However, there is an issue with this encounter. The enemy has a very small traveling distance, so it's super easy to outrun him. However, the chase music will play start to end when you encounter him, which is about 30 seconds long. It won't stop early if you're out of his range. The other entity that chases you around is in this large empty room with a well in the middle. Once you pick up this page, it'll be aggravated and chase you. The design itself kinda reminds you of Pinky from Doom 3, or at least it's the best thing I can draw a comparison to. This one plays no chase music and is a bit harder to outrun, but if you exercise caution, you should be fine. Now there is one scare I did not get my time playing this that I could not replicate. What happens is that when you collect the page in this ritual styled area, you are paralyzed in place for about a minute. Then the same girl we saw earlier jumps out of the book to scare you, and she does actually damage you. So you need to get away quickly. There are also a few other scares that happen in the maze, but they are kinda lame so I won't bother going through them. Once you find all those piano scores and have played them, the painting in the back of the room will fall down and reveal a dev room. This contains a small thank you note alongside some reactions of the developer's friends playing the game. Now that is all there is for the original Terrorift, but apparently there was supposed to be a sequel named Terrorift the Tower. The trailers for this game are actually still up if you can believe it. However, this game was soundly cancelled and the developer hasn't been active in a while. While I'd say this game is a somewhat interesting remnant of its time, it's nothing too special. Truth be told, it's just a developer's first attempt at making a game that was using stock assets and some of their own expertise. Lights off. I'll be real here, I just didn't know what a better outro would have been. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a nice night.